Without further ado, let's actually jump into it. And as always, we're going to start with a recap of the episode before we dive in, and we cut that recap out, host it on YouTube for your viewing convenience. So if you happen to find yourself on just that recap video, but you want to hear our full thoughts on the episode of us diving into all this lore, the link to the full video will be linked down below. All right, so we're recording this so soon after we don't know the episode title yet, but this is Campaign 3, Episode 58. And we pick up with our crew inside the Guild Hollow Tower, having just come face to face with this amorphous entity that is crawling out of the ceiling, which is where we left off the cliffhanger in the last one. So this thing slams down onto the ground, and it is this like slopping, amorphous, massive blob of teeth and mouths, and it's just horrific. And we roll initiative. And as always, I'm just gonna, hit the highlights of the combat. So to start things off, this thing does psychic damage, basically that you can't save from. It's not like a ton of damage, but that's like a constant thing that's happening throughout the whole combat. And with this being, this thing being so big, and this kind of chamber room not being the biggest, and also there's this, narrow stairway that's involved. Maneuverability in here is not great. So this encounter is very like limited for the party and what they can actually do. So combat's going on, and this creature is essentially trying to consume, amongst its other various attacks, members of the party by like literally eating them and enveloping them into itself.
Classic.
Yeah, so that's happening, and at one point, Imogen casts a lightning bolt, and this actually sets part of the room on fire. So also during this encounter, the whole tower is starting to go up in flames. Not to mention the fact that Frida in the previous episode like doused a bunch of the tower in oil so that they could burn it when they left. So they've got that going on as well. This creature ends up grappling Fern and uses two of its legendary actions to just straight up consume her, like I was referring to. And it actually rolls a nat 20 like during this interaction. So she takes 54 damage and is knocked out, and is knocked out inside of this creature. So she is making death saving throws and fails the first one. So now everyone's freaking out. But Frida is able to reach in and pull Fern out and cast Spare the Dying on her in the process. Chetney then immediately casts invisibility on Fern to help protect her unconscious body. And as the fight rages on, this creature like starts to form this massive mouth in its center, like 15 feet wide, and just spews miasma out all over basically like half the party, including Fern, again, who is unconscious. And everyone saves except for Fern, clearly. And this causes the Spare the Dying to basically get nullified because Fern takes more damage. And because of this, she now has 2 death fails. So Deanna uses her channel divinity to preserve life and basically gets Fern back up to half health. So she's now conscious, but still invisible. So combat continues, and this fire is starting to spread, and the creature does not like the fire. So it is kind of like forcing its way to the staircase to kind of trap half the party, but also to sort of escape from the fire itself. And things are getting kind of dicey. So Deanna uses her last big spell slot to cast Death Ward on Chetney, just because she's worried with how this is going, and she wants to do that with her last like big use of energy. But although it's looking dicey, Fern does run up eventually and cast Burning Hands on the creature and gets the "How do you want to do this?" moment. And this entity is called the Hate Monger. I don't think I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, right.
But they get the "How do you want to do this?" But there's not really much time to celebrate because, like I said, the whole place is burning down. So quickly, the focus shifts back to the strange circular area that they were investigating in the last episode. And they start to cast spell slots into it again, thinking that may be the way to unlock it. So Frida casts a Guiding Bolt, and then FCG casts Command saying "Open." And either coincidentally or not, that is when the thing does unlock and reveal itself to be this little like storage space within the wall. And all that's inside is just this old leather satchel. So FCG grabs it, and they'll check it out later because this place is burning down. So everyone is heading out, but they make a couple of last investigation checks to see if there's just anything else in here before this all burns away. Um, they don't see anything, but Chetney and Frida are stubborn and they're like, we'll stay and take a bit of fire damage. Like, we just want to make sure we'll do one more check.
And Matt's like, I took that personal.
Yeah. He's like, you already inspected this place and it's literally burning down. So, like, the DC is high to find anything you haven't already found. Anyway, but they stay, they roll, and Matt's like, yeah, I mean, you don't find anything new. But because they stayed so long, Chetney notices that in the corpse of the hate monger, this like limb like smashes out of like the remnants, and this entity starts crawling out of the corpse. And Chet is like, "Okay, let's get out of here." Um, but this thing continues to crawl out, and it's more humanoid than the previous iteration, but it is still like 10 feet tall. Has no eyes, a mouth, and like tendrils on its head. This weird aberration that basically starts chasing them out of the tower now. But as they're escaping, Imogen uses telekinesis to kind of hold it in place and lift it up so that everyone can get out, which they do. And FCG then casts Stone Shape to block off the only entrance and exit, essentially trapping this thing in the burning tower. So now that they're outside, they're like, well, we still got to get out of here. There's the wolf creature, there's that flying creature. Like, we're not safe yet. So they're trying to stealthily make their way out, but Frida gets a nat 1 and, causes a big commotion, which they all of a sudden start hearing the howls of the Wolf King. So, like,
Yep.
we got to go. So they make their way, guided by Imogen, who I believe rolled a natural 20 to guide them through. They do end up making their way kind of out of the city proper and over the main wall, and they can start to hear the howls in the distance, like the Wolf King's going a different way. So they did manage to successfully evade it. So they continue traveling just to get further and further away, and that's basically where we go to break on the first half.
And basically nothing else happened that
That's it.
episode, right? No.
Yep.
So there's like I'll just go and tell you guys, there's a crazy amount of things that happen in the second half of the episode. So Will's going to jump in if I miss a detail, but
Yeah.
especially in the comments, if I miss something, you can add it there as well. A lot, it's a very meaty lore second half. So the party basically comes back from the break. They have found this like abandoned nest. It's almost like a dome of thorns and thistles that they have now hidden inside within the Savalier Woods. And they're basically like, hey, let's look over the stuff that we got. So FCG opens up the satchel just as everyone's like, wait, no. And a trap goes off. He gets blown up to the ceiling of this little dome area and takes like 30, 40 points of force
decent
damage.
amount.
There's a lot. And he's like, ow. Then they open inside and there's nothing in there. And they're like, hang on, we're a little more clever than this. So they realize basically it's a bag of holding, and they ask it for Ludinus's notes. And when they do this, a pile of papers basically come out. Not only that, Chinny's going to eventually take the bag and basically dump everything out. They're going to get a handful of gems, some of them quite valuable. They're going to get a leather vest harness type of armor. They're going to get a staff. They're going to get a rod that is not a dildo. The second half is a very horny second half, by the way. Just getting it out there. There's a lot of sexual tension in the second half. But they made sure to point out it was not a dildo. And I think that's everything that they find. And basically what they're going to end up doing is they're going to basically be going through these notes from Ludinus. Now, at first they're blank. Chinny wipes like some soil on him, I think, and like is able like to faintly see some like script on it. And it's basically in Elvish. And Deanna basically begins reading these notes. Now, these notes are in batches of 3, like 3 sections of notes. The first one is oddly enough, it seems to be some kind of connection to the leather harness that they found. And there's language from Ludinus about basically feeding the root, and a reminder, like every number of years, I need to return to feed the root, which they're like, what does that mean? Well, also what's on here is a list of powerful Fey entities that are across Exandria. And not only that, some of them are scratched out. It seems like this is some kind of like hit list, or like Ludinus maybe needed to maybe even consume these creatures to do something. We're not sure what, but it's seemingly related to this leather harness that they have. They immediately decide maybe we need to ask Maury about this at some point. Fern has no idea what any of this is, being from the Feywild. But they decide, you know what? Let's hold off on putting the harness on for now. We don't know what's going to happen with it. Let's look at the second pile of notes. So they look at the second pile of notes, and it's basically like a personal scrawlings from Ludinus, pretty much cursing the fact that he wasn't born as a Rude is born, and sort of begrudging the fact that he wasn't God touched, and sort of yearning for that. However, he commits himself to basically connecting, having some kind of communion with the ruddy moon. And he's set on it. He's stubborn on it. He's like, whenever a flare happens, I'm going to find a way to connect with it and talk with it. And it's also around this time that the party is kind of like, I think it's Imogen's like, Ludinus was such an idiot. Like, he didn't even know what he was reaching out to, didn't even know like what he was doing. And yet he was obsessed with doing this. They look at the third pile of notes, and it's basically a description of this like well of energy or well of power that sits beneath Malesmere. And there's conversation about this well being possibly something that came from one of the falling cities during the calamity, or that it's some kind of gift from the Archheart. And essentially, the connection seems to be that Ludinus wants to harness the energy of this well in order to commune with Ruidus in some way. And that's the last of the notes. Like I mentioned, the party's basically like, what's this? Like, what is he up to? What's the harness? Should we put it on? Maybe we shouldn't. But they decide to basically look at the other items they have. The large staff is an extremely powerful item called the Staff of Dark Odyssey. It is a little bit like the Ring of Spell Storing in that it has some spells that are stored in it. And one of them is the teleportation spell. And they immediately realize, hey, we can teleport. Like, we can teleport and take all of us and go see our friends again. Like, where should we go? Should we go back to Uthadern? Maybe we should go to Uthadern and give these papers to the king and queen. And there's a lot of conversation on like what they should do with these papers. Where should they go from here? They talk about Vasselheim, and they're also being like, well, no one really knows us there. Like I mentioned, they talk about Uthadern, and Chetney's like, I don't trust the king and queen. Like, we were the most powerful people there. Like, I think this kind of stuff should stay with us. And ultimately, they're going to talk about this later in the episode in this back half, but they table it for a second. The small, not a dildo, stick thingy
rod,
is
I think.
Rod. Thank you. Why do I keep calling it a stick? Yeah, it's a rod. It is a oh man, I forgot what it was called, but it lets you go to another plane if you have like a focus in that plane of existence.
Yeah, it's like a tuning fork.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah. So there's that, and they're still a bit unsure as to what the harness is and what it does. But they do decide, let's not put it on for now, I guess. So they decide they're going to sleep on it, that they're going to wait till the next day to decide exactly where they're going to teleport. But before they go to bed, there is this thing with Frida and having Frida feeling like some kind of connection to Malesmere, and specifically the names Laren and the other two people that were mentioned in the previous episode. And if you recall, Imogen and FGG had offered to basically dream dive, to share a dream with Frida and figure out what was going on there. So Frida agrees. They immediately go into their memories, and they see Dee pulling Frida out of some rubble, repairing them. It kind of flashes forward. We see Frida with Deanna and sort of just sharing some camaraderie over a fireplace. There's some kind of like memory of children in some way. And ultimately, the memories go way back to a time, we're not sure of where it is, but Frida is in the middle of this sort of all-out battle. And not only in this all-out battle, Frida is absolutely shredding people, like breaking necks, like killing people. And Matt describes Frida sort of awash with this sense of regret and sadness. And it's in this moment that Frida realizes that the people they're fighting are former allies. Like there's some kind of rebellion or coup of some way happening. And unfortunately, in this dream, he has a couple of chances to roll. He rolls, I think, a 4 and then a 10, and just can't quite get the lore drop that we all wanted. We're just like,
Yeah.
come on. I think Travis was just like, bro, come on. So anyway, they have an opportunity, the three of them, to kind of like follow the momentum of the soldiers, and instead Frida decides to look back and go back. They go down a tunnel and they open up into this large, they get to this large atrium of a room with gizmos and sort of like this incredibly energetic room of all this technology, this massive contraption that has a little bit of a similarity to the Malleus keys, but is also quite different. And there is a voice that shouts basically to protect the Factorum. Then there is a buzzing energy, everything fades to white, and the party wakes up. Chetney immediately points out that the Factum is the Factum Malleus, the creator hammer, which was the powerful weapon that AR had created to kill the gods. And they realized that Frida was there. He was there in that moment. And there's also a memory of them, again, being recovered by D. Matt describes being on like the edge of ruin, and D not only recovering Frida, but repairing them and restoring them, and then sort of like setting them on their way. The party again talks more about where should we go. Like we're not sure where we should teleport to. Again, they table it. And then there's this really sweet, touching memory or moment between Deanna and Chetney, where Deanna is very much kind of aloof. She realizes that Frida's feeling kind of in a tough way and tries to reach out to Frida. And Frida's like, I just don't want to be touched. I don't want to be hugged. And actually says it's the first time that Frida has ever rejected a hug from Deanna. So Deanna's pretty sad and on her own, and she basically confides in Chetney and says, like, I feel like Frida's maybe moving on, and I'm worried that everyone's going to leave me just like what happened to me, you know, once I died and was revived.
Yeah.
Chetney immediately is reassuring her, and they have a little spark there. In fact, Deanna's like, thanks, Chet, that's really nice. And is like, hey, tell me about this werewolf thing. And mentioning it was a very horny episode. They both run out into the wilderness and call Fern to follow as well, who obliges. Imogen does a thumb war with herself as like her, Frida, and FCG are the only ones left for the evening. And that's the evening. I think actually also before they went to sleep, FCG does. Oh wait, this is the next morning. I can't remember, but a couple more things are going to happen. FCG is going to cast communion with the Changebringer, and the reason for that is because they're just trying to decide where to go. Like, where should we do this teleportation spell? Should we go to Dressar? Maybe our friends would be there. Maybe we go to Marquette. And there's a lot of like random things as well, where Imogen's even like, "Hey, stop with these stupid ideas. Like, where are we going to go?" So FGG does commune. He's immediately elevated to this place where they see the Changebringer, is able to ask questions, notably, are my friends alive? And the Changebringer says yes. And basically is like, also asks, hey, am I going to know Frida for a long time? And the answer is basically like, the future hasn't been written yet. Then suddenly, FCG is like ripped forward, like right into the space of the Changebringer. And the Changebringer basically gives them a command as a champion of the Changebringer and says, there's a terrible fate that's looming, and calls this fate or this terrible thing the Red End, and says that it stirs in its slumber, and you know, you can't turn away from this road. Like, it's time to basically like take up my banner and prevent the evil that's going to happen. FGG after the fact mentions how what's kind of on brand for the Changebringer is you kind of make your own path, and like, okay, well, now I'm not. Now I'm supposed to do this exactly, I guess. Similarly, Deanna has this vision of the Dawnfather standing in all of its might, flaming head of a sun, and commands Deanna to basically do the same, to take up his banner to stop the I keep want to say the big red, the red end, and basically threatens to say, if you don't do this, I will take back from you the gifts I have granted you. One of the gifts that she infers this to mean, the gift of revival, what had brought her back from the dead. So they both come out of this, vision, and they're like, okay, looks like it's our job to stop this. And they're like, hey, so should we split up? And like, Fern's like, no, you should stay with us forever. And you could just see Matt kind of like, okay, well, I guess I need to figure this out. And ultimately, the party decides to. Deanna does give Chetney her ring of temporal salvation because she's worried about Chetney, wants to make sure that he'll be okay and he'll get through all of this. And then the party decides to teleport to Dressar, specifically Zadana's house, the woman who Laudna and Imogen had been renting a room from. And the episode ends as the party gets sucked into this teleportation spell, not knowing if they're going to arrive there safely or not. And that is where episode 58 finally ends. So much stuff. And again, that's the episode. Oh, I forgot one thing. One important detail. There is a conversation with Chetney as they're talking about the planes rider Rod or whatever, and he's talking about like some of the work he's done in the past, and he mentions the Rexentrum Toy Authority, and there's this awesome moment with FGG being like, Rexentrum Toy Authority, RTA. Is that your tattoo? And Jenny's like, no, it's a union. And he's like, you got a tattoo for a union? And basically just realized the source of his tattoo, which was a really great moment. Yeah. So that was the end of the episode. And again, if we left anything out, you put it in the comments. But if you're watching just the recap, we'll have a link to the full episode discussion so you can join us there. So
yeah, great job, by the way. There was a lot to cover there.
That was one of the meatiest episodes we've ever had, I feel like.
Yeah, and we got a whole lot to dive into. So again, if you just watched the recap, check it down below for our full thoughts. Yeah, bro, so much to talk about. I don't even really I'm overwhelmed with where to begin.